with creativity, it's not that you either have it or you don't, but it's really a mindset that we can cultivate.
Creativity is not just a spontaneous act. It's an iterative process where you're building upon the things that you've created before. And as a result, you end up with something that's so much more impactful than what you originally started out with.
Creativity isn't just about this lightning bolt idea popping into your mind. It's also about combining ideas that already exist and building upon those ideas to create something new. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Finding Simple Abundance podcast with Adam and Maggie. I'm Maggie.
And I'm Adam.
And today we are talking about pursuing creativity. This is one of our pillars in our simple framework. And this is the fourth pillar in how we want to live a good life, the things that we want to hold ourselves accountable to, the things that we want to focus on in life, and just like make sure we're touching on these and keeping these a priority. So in our simple framework, do the rundown, Adam. What are all of our pillars real quick? And then we'll dive into pursuing creativity, why we chose this as a pillar, also what it means to us, why we think creativity is important, why did we put the word pursue creativity in there, and just our thoughts around this pillar, why it's important. So anyway, do the rundown of the simple framework.
Man, we are getting to business today.
We are
rolling. Okay.
Oh,
yeah, absolutely. Well, Maggie, thank you so much for sitting down with me and having this conversation today.
Thank you.
I would love to give you the rundown of this simple framework. And the reason I would love it is because it is so simple.
It's so simple.
And it spells the word simple.
Love it.
And that allows me to remember it. So S is seek vitality. I is inner awareness. M is meaningful relationships, what we talked about last week. P is pursue creativity. L is live dynamically, which I cannot wait for next week. And embrace thriving, which I still say is my favorite of all the pillars. But today we're talking about pursuing creativity. I love the setup. I love the question of, I think that what you said there, why pursue creativity? What is creativity? What does it mean to us? Why do we want to use creativity as a tool for having a more dynamic and meaningful life?
Yeah, like why is it important to us? As another reminder and backstory to the simple framework, it's like we created this for ourselves. Yeah. So anyone else out there listening, it's just kind of a tool that we use as a guide in our life for pillars of what's important to us. So yours might be different.
But if you want to live a good life,
you want to live like us,
use these pillars.
So anyway, pursuing creativity, I think that creativity is one of those things where so often I think people either put themselves in a category of I'm either creative or I'm not creative. Mm-hmm. And so I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah. I mean, I, for the longest time, never really considered myself as a creative person. So I get that, the dichotomy there.
And I was always like, are you serious? Yeah.
Which is funny. Yeah. Looking at it as a musician, it's like what I do.
Like all other people are like, you play music.
It's interesting though, because we can sometimes define creativity for ourselves. And if we don't match up to that one specific form of creativity, then it's easy to say I'm not a creative person.
Yeah.
So for the longest time, I kind of considered visual art to be the creative, for whatever reason, that's how I define creativity.
Yeah.
And so I was never very good at drawing. I don't really have an eye for painting. I couldn't draw a straight line, even with a ruler.
Yeah.
And so I just never really considered myself as a creative person.
Yeah.
Even though in this other aspect of creativity, and we're talking fine arts here, this other aspect, being a musician, I had some ability to be creative. But then again, that creativity in the music side of things wasn't how I saw other people being creative in music. And so I never really thought I was creative. It was more like, well, I can put the Lego blocks of playing music together. And so I guess that's music.
Like I can do it, but I'm not really creative musically. Yeah. I think there's an idea that creativity has to be this thing that like you just like have this lightning bolt like come down on you and you have these great ideas and these grand things. And then that's not always really what creativity is. And there's many different definitions.
Well, and I think that's what you're kind of alluding to. And I love that you're setting this up for us. There are many different types of creativity, right? And most often we tend to think about fine arts. So dance, art, like drawing, painting.
Like very visual things.
Music, even.
Yeah.
These types of art in terms of creativity. But one of the reasons why we really wanted pursuing creativity to be one of our pillars in living a good life is because there's another form of creativity that you actually touched on in the newsletter this week, which if you're not signed up for the newsletter, definitely
sign up.
Head over to adamandmaggie.com and check that out.
Yes.
But this week, I really appreciated your take because you talked about creativity in terms of the way we think and just the way that we approach problems, the way that we approach life. To realize that we have a sense of creativity, an act of creating our lives and not just taking life as it comes, but being able to, just think creatively and think about how do I want to live? What type of life do I want to have? I come to a problem. How can I think creatively around this problem? I just really think that was a great little insight. So,
And I think with creativity, it's not that you either have it or you don't, but it's really a mindset that we can cultivate. And I think with all of these pillars, I always come back to that statement, which is so silly, but so true. And that's why there are pillars, because it's a mindset that we can work on and that we can cultivate. It's not just that I either have it or I don't have it. It's that I can start to see the world in a more creative way, or I can start to build upon things that other people are already doing. Just kind of just seeing the world in a more like beautiful way where I'm the participant in the world. I'm also a creator, and just kind of, I don't know, I like this pillar to just remind us that we're creators.
Well, it's interesting, creative as an adjective for something else versus like creator as in, actually within the noun, like I am a creator. And then to create, the verb, like it works across all the spectrum. I just get into the words type stuff. But it's interesting that creativity can flow through everything. Like as a creator, I can create my life and think creatively about how I want to live. And so it's just an important aspect of the life that we wanted to live. Because I think a lot of times we can just get stuck in this is just the way things. Exactly. This is just the way it is. And while it's good to accept the way things are, you don't to take a second and say like, this is reality. But then to take it one step further and say, okay, but if I had the creativity, if I had the opportunity to do something else or build something else or think about this differently, how would I change it? What would I do? And then to pursue that.
And it goes back to also, thinking of it as a mindset. It goes back to the podcast that we did about dead ends and how there's no dead end, and just this thinking in ways of more possibilities and more solutions to problems, and that there's always another way, or that takes creative thinking and thinking outside the box of this is how it is, and thinking in terms of there's so many solutions to so many of our problems, or so many of our seeming problems. I think that's just a good reminder, because it's a way of life too, that we can all be more like that. Like we're not born that way. It's something that we can start to
cultivate and practice.
Yeah.
So speaking of cultivating and practicing, one way that I've found to be creative, and you talked about this in the newsletter, is creativity can be taking something out of nothing to then having something. So creating from nothing. But one of the really easy ways of creating or getting into a creative mindset is to take two things that seemingly don't go together, put them together and say, what would need to be true for these things to really exist together? And so an example of
Make
that
a new thing.
would be, like a a bicycle
Right.
and, a battery.
Yeah.
It's like, well, these things don't exist together, but all of a sudden you put them together and all of a sudden now you have like these like battery powered bicycles. That was one of the examples you had in the newsletter. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I'll think about that. Currently, I'm in the midst of starting, or I guess we are starting a business where we are helping business professionals kind of brand themselves on the internet.
Yep.
And, talk about the things they're doing, share about the ways that they're helping the world and making an impact. But I love thinking in systems. I love business, like kind of consulting, like hearing about problems, coming up with creative solutions. So what's interesting is as a creative solution, we're saying, okay, well, what if we were writing for the customer, like ghostwriting in terms of, helping them share their message, but then also as a fun little byproduct, get a chance to talk with them about the challenges they're having in the business.
Right.
And how they can make their business better. Like we're maximizers. We want to maximize their business. Yeah. And so we're not just ghostwriters. We're not just business consultants.
Yeah.
Like we have this weird kind of amalgamation of all these different things. And that came about through this creative process.
Yeah.
Actually, that was inspired a lot by this latest newsletter where you're like, well, what would happen if you just combined two things?
Right.
And
made a new thing.
Process.
It's unique to you.
Yeah.
It's very unique to you. I think that's so cool too when you're just recognizing that creativity isn't just these lightning bolt ideas, but they're ideas that build upon other things, or they're ideas that come about because you are noticing like a constraint in your life. And so you're recognizing like your constraints, but also your strengths and how you can put those together to be creative, to come up with something that's unique to you or that works for you or that's, more authentic to your life. Like that's living creatively. And this is kind of a silly example, but I was like, no, this is creativity. This is that like building upon ideas that are already there, or like wants and needs that I have in life or desires. So it's like, it's the holiday season right now. And I really value those little moments, like family moments or like with our son. And like, how can I create space for those things and make time to like, even though it might be like not the most creative project or something, it's like, I'm recognizing that I want to put those two things together and like spend quality time, listen to music and like do a craft with him or like, make snowflakes for the window. Like, it's like, we just like looked up how to make them and we did, but it wasn't anything crazy unique, but the experience was, So anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's cool. I think the idea of combining everything together like that is just a really easy way to find creativity. Like you said, I want a meaningful moment with my
son. With my
and I also want to embrace the holidays. It's like cool. Like then it narrows down what you're doing all of a sudden, and then you can come to some really creative solutions. Yeah. Snowflakes was just one example of what you could have done in order to have that meaningful moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
And as we're talking about that example, it seems so obvious.
Yeah.
And it really almost doesn't make sense to like call it creativity.
I know.
But that's exactly like you said, that's the point.
Yeah.
That's the point. Creativity is just how you move through the world.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be this big, all-encompassing, today I will be creative.
Yeah.
It's just a mindset shift of saying, how do I want to manifest my life? How do I want to live the way that I want to live? Yeah. And then just recognizing that it's possible.
Yeah. Yeah. Another random thing that just came to my mind was one of our friends, so our home is like very like fairly small and simple, and that's kind of the way that we love it. And so we still invite tons of people over, even though we have a very small space, and we're creative in the way that we kind of like use the outside space and just whatever. And so we use that as a constraint almost to kind of create this like cozy atmosphere where like there's just so many people all in one little spot, and it's really cool. And I think a lot of our friends really enjoy that. I mean, at least I hope you do. And yeah, so I think just using those things and thinking creatively, and it even inspired one of our friends to tell me that, yeah, like I kind of thought that our home was too small to host people, but you guys have inspired me that like it's possible. Like I want
You invited
to do
people
that.
to your shoebox. Like, why not?
Yeah,
It's
why
like, it's
not?
gotta be possible.
So yeah, but just thinking along those creative lines that anything's possible. Like why not? You know, like I don't have to have a mansion in order to invite everyone over. And yeah. Anyway.
Well, and that creativity is also just a mindset in terms of recognizing that sometimes what you think is a problem isn't actually a problem.
Right.
And it's the creativity to say, hey, what if having a small space wasn't bad, was actually good?
Yeah.
Like you're not changing anything other than just how you perceive this situation.
Yeah.
And that in and of itself is an act of creativity.
Yeah.
It's you saying, the world is wanting me to think this way.
Yeah.
What if I didn't?
Yeah.
What if I actually just perceived this as okay?
Yeah. Yeah. And then really cool things come out of it, you know, that you don't even expect. And I think that's honestly, I think that's what more often than not, like the things that we think like, oh, how did they come up with that? It was kind of just more of an accident than anything. People were just trying things and it came about and you're like, whoa, I didn't even necessarily intend for that to happen. But it was more about having an open mind to the whole situation instead of like a closed mind, like, oh, that can't happen, you know?
So one question I have for you, and this is something that I'm more just interested in your take, and I'm throwing you on the spot here. We've not talked about this also. What is your take on creativity as a spontaneous act versus an iterative approach to creativity? Like, do you see, like, what does one have more impact on your life? And I'm talking about you specifically.
Yeah.
Would you say you're more of a spontaneous type creative person, an iterative creative person? When or where do you use both types of practices? And what are the difference between the two? 'Cause I have ideas, but I just was curious what you thought.
I think for me personally, it's probably a little bit more intuitive and spontaneous in the way that it comes about. I feel like I'm tuned in to myself and what I desire. And so then, you know what I mean? Like I want, I kind of like flow with how life is in
Maggie
that
is
chapter.
water, if you will. She is water.
I'm aware of what that chapter of life needs. And so I'm open to the possibilities, I think. Yeah. But I also think that cultivating creativity in this iterative process of like, you know, putting yourself out there, even though things that you're creating aren't necessarily perfect, and like building upon them, I think that's another form of creativity that's just as valuable and amazing. Yeah. What do you think?
I would say, I tend to have fallen into the spontaneous creativity category for the longest time.
Yeah.
But what I've realized is that some of my most creative work actually comes from an iterative process, but it takes more work to do the iterative process, the iterations.
Yeah.
And so it's easier to go, oh, that was my burst of creativity, and now I can set this aside and be done with it.
Yeah.
And when you go from 0 to 1, it does feel like it's like, wow, I was creative. Now this thing didn't exist before. It didn't exist. Now it does exist.
Yeah.
Like this podcast, like this newsletter went from 0 to 1. Like that's a very creative process. We're creating this, you know? Yeah. We had even toyed with, or are still toying with the idea of like the couple creator. The word creator is like, we as a couple want to like manifest something.
Yeah.
But as I'm discovering that if you don't just create and then drop it, if you actually hold on to it and if you keep building on it and keep adjusting it, that's no less a creative process, the small iterations, and the end result is actually way better. Yeah. Even if the end result actually looks almost nothing like the beginning. In order to get there, you had to have moved through those steps. Yeah. And that process alone, recognizing the value of that and trying to cultivate that in my own life has had the biggest difference for me in how I think about creativity and how I use creativity in both my work, my life, and my relationships.
Yeah. I think that like having structure in life in whatever form that ends up being for a person. I think there's this like paradox of freedom and structure that needs to be in place. Like you need to have both. Like I think we need to feel like that we're very free, but at the same time also creating structure for ourselves to feel that like box to think outside of, or to have those rules in place to think outside of. And I think the best way is when we create those for ourselves and other people aren't creating those for us, or if we feel that way, even like if we perceive it that way, like this person is creating this thing and now I have to think outside of it. It's like that can, like, I don't know, that type of thinking. Like I think it's the best when you've created something for yourself, these either kind of rules or structure, to then use as a constraint to propel you into this creative state. Like even with the podcast and the newsletter, it's like we've made a decision. We've put the constraints in place
every week.
We're going to do this every week.
Yeah.
And some weeks are easier to get it out than others. But because it's in place, I'm having to think about the next idea. I'm having to, do writing and processing on these topics. And where if that structure wasn't there, I wouldn't be doing that. I wouldn't be thinking of these things, or
even though you had ultimate creativity.
Yeah. To my disposal.
Without that constraint of, but I've got the next podcast coming up.
Yeah.
You wouldn't be that forcing function to actually think through what's the next topic going to be?
Right.
How am I going to approach it?
Right.
How can I really lean in and use it throughout this week to really embody this idea of, whatever it is. So,
and I think one last thing about this, I think the really cool thing is that what I was kind of trying to get to earlier was that we impose those on ourselves. It wasn't somebody else saying, hey, you've got this to do and this to do, and you need to do it. And then I was like, okay, here we go. It was like, oh no, we decided to do that and we are holding ourselves accountable. I think there's a lot to learn in doing those things for yourself.
Yeah, I love it.
Anyway.
Well, the phrase creative constraints is such a powerful one. And creative constraints, meaning constraints in your creativity, which allow you to actually kind of intensify that creative process. Yeah. But then also the fact that the constraints themselves are also creative. Like I have to create those. Yeah. And so you can get creative with what kind of constraints you put on yourself. Yeah. Yourself in order to live the life that you want to live. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah.
And I think that's so, we were talking about this the other day. I won't go into all the details because
I'm so curious what
it didn't come across like super well as we were having this conversation. But we have ultimate ability to do anything we want.
Yeah.
At any point of the day.
Oh, now, I know what you're talking about.
We tend to think that we don't have choice or free will or options. You're like, well, no, I can't just get on a plane and fly to Dubai. Mm-hmm. But
you totally
could. Yeah. Right? Or I couldn't just right now go to the coffee shop and spend $10,000 on coffee.
Right.
I don't know why you ever would, but you could. That's the beauty of
what's holding you back.
What's holding you back is just your own, decision making. Mm-hmm. Probably a good decision because that sounds like a terrible decision. But we have ultimate freedom to do the things that we want to do. And as we're moving to this world of social media, in particular, it is incredibly toxic in its own right. But it's also completely freeing.
Yeah.
And the fact that these are permissionless platforms. Like you can just, no one gives you permission to write. Right. No one gives you permission to record this podcast, for us to record this podcast. Mm-hmm. No one gives us permission to write this newsletter. But we have ultimate freedom to like manifest the things that we want in this world. Mm-hmm. We can do it. We can create. That's that sense of creativity.
Yeah.
The creativity to just even recognize what is possible.
Yeah.
And then to pursue it.
Yeah.
And say this is possible, so I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
Because why not?
I know.
No one, you don't have to ask for permission.
Yeah. Yeah.
In fact, it's kind of weird how little we have to ask for permission in this world.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's really cool to, in a sense, start with an outcome that you're wanting, and then know that there's so many paths. That's kind of where the creativity comes in. There's so many paths to getting there. And that's the fun of life, is figuring it out. Like, what path are you going to take, you know? Yeah. With the cards that you've been dealt, you know?
And what cards can you go just grab? I want other cards.
Yeah.
Well, we talked about that idea of remembering that we're all going to die.
Yeah.
That's the ultimate creative constraint.
Yeah.
It's like, we're all going to die.
Yeah.
No one's going to get out of life alive.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
and
what are you going to do within the frame of that context? Of that life?
Yeah. It was cool because I was listening to the book. We mentioned it last week because we're so in the throes of it. Naval Ravikant, The Almanac of Naval Ravikant. Mm-hmm. And he has a little blurb about that, and how really, like, legacy is a myth when we really think about it. Like, leaving a legacy after so many years, no one's going to remember. Even the things that you did, even the things that you left behind, more or less remember you. But even just, I think sometimes we get hung up on leaving a legacy or making an impact on the world in some way. And in a way, it's like, no, what we need to focus on is what we can do now in the moment that is going to make us feel the most alive and the most connected to this larger, humanity that we are a part of, that we are living with and that we could not live without. Like, we're very, dependent on each other to even survive. So yeah, how can we utilize and just like live so fully in every moment? Because that's really all we have.
It's deep.
Oh, damn.
I love that.
Anyways, I don't know. It was just like, I don't even know if I have that whole thought fleshed out yet. But I don't know. He said that and I was just like, whoa, I don't know. I don't even know exactly what to think about that. But
well, I do recognize that after a couple generations, we just don't remember.
Yeah.
I don't know much about my great-great-great-grandparents.
Right. And I think in a way, like, we do impact the future. I think we do impact, but being so focused on leaving a legacy.
Well, and especially what people think of you. I think that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, maybe that's
like, I want to have an impact.
Yeah.
But I shouldn't care about what other people think about us.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what they think about me now. And it certainly won't matter what they think about me in 3 generations. If they ever do.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So, yeah, it's just one of those things where it's better to focus on the impact we're making right now.
Right.
And also just making decisions for the decision's sake, not for how other people will perceive us for those decisions.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it feels like we've gone far afield from creativity, but I mean, bringing it all full circle. I mean, this is what creativity is. It's thinking in terms of possibilities. It's thinking in terms of when you are, a problem arises, like how can we, come at it from a creative mindset? How can we combine things? We can look at it differently. We can just move through the world in a different and dynamic way.
Yeah.
And that is creativity for me.
Yeah. And being okay to fail. I think creativity, because we are really only here for a finite amount of time, it's like being okay to just play, like to play with life and be like, if I do that thing and it flops, oh, well. I think that's part of the creative process and the creative mindset, to try things out, experiment, see if it looks good, see if it looks bad, because it doesn't necessarily matter as much as we think it matters, because we can always build upon that and keep growing and keep learning and keep experiencing. It might lead us to new experiences that we might not have ever had, or meet new people, or come up with new ways of thinking about life if we don't think outside of the terms that we're thinking on and be okay with failing and trying things.
Yeah, there's an intrepid attitude associated with creativity.
Yeah.
Like you don't know what the ultimate outcome will be when you get started in any sort of endeavor.
Yeah.
It's kind of the analogy of walking through the mist.
Yeah.
Like you don't actually know what that next step is going to look like until you take the step. And then all of a sudden the mist starts to slowly part and you're able to see this new world, this new reality that you're in.
Right.
And again, you won't see what the next step is until you take that next step.
Yeah.
And so the mist slowly departs from you and you start to realize, oh, I'm climbing.
Yeah.
And then you realize, oh, I'm at the top of this mountain.
Yeah.
Or at least you think it's the top of the mountain. But then the mist clears and you realize you're just like one of the sub peaks and you have to like almost like keep going in order to get to that next one.
Right.
But this idea of you don't even know what opportunities are out there until you take that first step.
Yeah.
It's impossible to even imagine what some of the opportunities are. That's kind of like where when we started this podcast and the newsletter and kind of this whole idea of this year of living intentionally and building a business online so that we had some more flexibility, freedom, impact, purpose, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Our understanding of of reality and of what's possible has changed so significantly just in the past 3 months as we are leaning into this whole world.
Yeah.
And I couldn't have told you that this is where we would be when we started out in August. But here we are.
I know.
You know?
Yeah. And I think it's cool because I think as humans, we kind of need in order to kind of take those leaps and make those moves of having some kind of outcome or goal that we're kind of reaching for. But at the same time, like you said, I think it's really, thinking of the mist parting as you're going. I think it's so important to hold those goals and outcomes loosely so that they can change and expand and get bigger as you go instead of, once I get hit that, then I'm good. It's like really thinking more open to the possibilities as you go. So yeah, having kind of goal outcome mindset, but at the same time, really open to the possibilities that may come up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. Creative constraints, creativity, manifestation.
It's cool.
Not just music and art, but also thinking
creatively. I think in that when we think about pursue as the word pursue, creativity, using that word as something where we're really shaping the lens of how we're seeing the world. And so putting on those lenses, I guess, and to pursue these creative mindset and things. And I think there's so much to learn even from those fine art skills about creativity, but recognizing that there's more to it than that. Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Very good. So that's pursuing creativity, the fourth pillar of our simple framework, our framework for living the good life.
Yeah.
Next week, we're going to be talking about live dynamically. I think we're both really excited for that one.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh,
any precursors for any little taste of next week?
A little taste of next week. Don't be afraid of death, Winnie. Be afraid of the unlived life. That's from Tuck Everlasting.
Tuck Everlasting.
Such a good book, but also a good movie.
Was it a good movie, or was it?
I mean, that's where I had the accent come from.
Oh, true. You didn't read him with an accent.
I didn't read him with a Scottish accent.
Yeah.
Yeah, living dynamically and looking for opportunities to stretch yourself and be uncomfortable and do things that are challenging and maybe out of your comfort zone, but ultimately lead to a very dynamic life.
Absolutely. And we go into further depth, but also kind of different angles of all of these different frameworks if you go in our newsletter. So feel free to go to adamandmaggie.com and sign up for that. In fact, one of our previous newsletters, just kind of a shout out, was Seeking Vitality. And Maggie put up a curated list of all of her favorite yoga videos that she found on the internet. And they're broken up into different skill sets, durations. It's a really interesting guide. And so if you're ever interested in kind of living a more, deeper life or have been curious about yoga, I definitely encourage you to take a look at that newsletter.
Yeah.
You can find it on the website there, and then there's a link to take you to it.
Because
it's really fun.
There's so many.
There's so many.
The internet is saturated with yoga. Yeah. So if you're interested in starting yoga, I just think it's a really good way to get your feet wet and kind of, from somebody who's done a lot of yoga in my life, know where to start, and just some good quality videos that make sense with wherever you're at.
Yep. We also have some book recommendations on there, some books that have changed our lives. We have some different perspectives. Maggie mentioned our No Dead Ends podcast, where we talked about this idea of no dead ends, how we as a family are always thinking creatively and looking for ways to, kind of continue on even when it feels like you hit that roadblock, if you will. So a lot of really fun resources there. A lot of time and effort has gone into the creativity of all of that content, and it's been so much fun.
It's been so much fun.
Yeah. We have our baby Eva right at our feet, who is slowly waking up. So we're going to probably wrap this one up a little bit. And I'm going to say, Maggie, thank you so much for sitting down with me today. I really appreciate it. And for talking about pursuing creativity.
Absolutely. I love it.
Very cool. All right. Till next week. Bye.
Bye.